Maybe you just clicked out of curiosity, or maybe, without realizing it, you were searching for a quiet place where words come slowly and silence is part of the conversation. I wrote this story gently, like stitching together memories, pain, and discoveries, hoping you might see a bit of yourself in it. If you do, even for a moment, stay a while. Listen as long as you can. And if you feel like it, leave a small sign. It doesn't have to be much. Sometimes just a simple comment or subscribe quietly changes everything. I'm Natalie, 32, single mom to a 6-year-old boy named Ethan. He's small for his age, with big hazel eyes that always seem to ask me how he should feel before he dares to react. Smart, careful, and, if I'm honest, a little too quiet for a child his age. I grew up in a house where silence was survival. My parents, Richard and Carol, weren't the type to scream or throw things, but their words could cut deeper than any belt. Every choice I made, every move I took, felt like an inconvenience to them. Love, in that house, was something you earned by being invisible, and even then, it rarely came. It had been almost a full year since I'd spoken to them. I told myself I was done with the cold looks, the judgment, the way they'd make me feel like I was still 12 and a disappointment. Ethan didn't need that. I didn't need that. Then came his 6th birthday. I was cutting his little cake, just the two of us in my small apartment, when my phone lit up with Mom and Dad on the screen. For a split second, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but guilt has a way of digging its claws into you. I answered. My mom's voice was flat, like this was a business call. If you want us to still be in his life, you better make the effort. No, happy birthday. No, how's our grandson? Just a condition. I swallowed the familiar lump in my throat. Yeah, maybe we can drive down next weekend. I could almost hear my dad in the background, muttering something about how I should have known better. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at Ethan as he carefully licked frosting off his fingers. He had no idea that the people who shared my blood had never really shared any love. That night, after I tucked him in, I lay awake debating. I knew exactly how it would go, how their house felt colder than any winter night, how Ethan would sense it even if he didn't understand it. But that sentence my mom said, it clung to me like a spider web. If you want us to still be in his life. And so, against every instinct screaming at me to stay away, I packed a small bag, buckled Ethan into the car, and drove 2 hours toward the house that never felt like home. The next Saturday morning, I loaded up the car with a small overnight bag and Ethan's favorite stuffed fox. He bounced in his booster seat, humming to himself, while I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I should have. 2 hours on the road gave me too much time to think. Ethan chattered about how maybe Grandpa would have a swing set, or that Grandma might make cookies. I forced a smile, but inside, my stomach twisted. I knew better. As we left the highway and turned onto the quiet suburban street I grew up on, the memories came flooding back. Every mailbox, every trimmed hedge, was a snapshot of my childhood, and the unspoken rule that I was never good enough. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly the same, white siding, navy shutters, but somehow smaller, colder. Ethan's excitement made my heart ache. Mom, is this it? Grandma and Grandpa's house? Yeah, buddy, this is it, I said, my voice thinner than I wanted. I rang the doorbell. It opened to reveal my dad, Richard, wearing the same gray flannel he always wore on weekends. His eyes went straight past me to Ethan. He didn't smile, didn't bend down, just said flatly, "So, that's the boy, huh?" Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door hanging open. Ethan's little fingers curled around mine. Inside, the familiar smell hit me. Lemon cleaner and something faintly metallic, like the air itself didn't want to be breathed. My mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She crouched slightly, not to hug Ethan, but to inspect him. Her gaze lingered on his cheeks and belly. He's a bit chubby, isn't he? Ethan shifted closer to me, unsure if he should answer. My chest tightened, but I forced a polite laugh that tasted like rust. He's healthy. He's 6. She straightened, already moving toward the hallway. Shoes off. You know the rule. It wasn't a welcome. It was like we were a nuisance tracking dirt into her perfect world. I knelt to help Ethan with his sneakers. He whispered, Mom, do they not like me? My throat burned, but I kissed his hair. They just need time to get to know you? But as I stood up, my heart sank, because I knew better.
Talvez você tenha chegado aqui por curiosidade, ou quem sabe estava procurando um cantinho calmo, onde as histórias chegam devagar e o silêncio também faz parte da conversa. Se em algum momento você se reconhecer nas minhas palavras, fica mais um pouquinho. E se sentir vontade, deixe um sinal, um comentário simples, um like ou só um "tô aqui". Às vezes, isso já muda tudo. Eu tinha 27 anos quando minha vida desmoronou de vez. O divórcio saiu rápido, o dinheiro evaporou e, de repente, eu me vi sozinha, sem emprego e com meu filho de 6 anos, Gabriel, olhando para mim com aqueles olhos grandes e curiosos, como se perguntasse: "E agora, mamãe?" Não havia escolha. Eu tive que voltar para a casa da minha mãe, Dona Silvia, em Belo Horizonte, a mesma casa em que eu jurei que nunca mais colocaria os pés. Só de atravessar o portão enferrujado, senti aquele frio antigo na espinha, uma mistura de lembranças ruins e medo do que estava por vir. Dona Silvia até abriu a porta com um sorriso curto, mas quando olhou para Gabriel, foi como se tivesse visto um cachorro de rua molhado que alguém largou na varanda. O olhar dela dizia tudo: desprezo. Vocês podem ficar, temporariamente, ela disse, cruzando os braços. Nos deu um quarto no porão, um quarto gelado, com parede descascando e um colchão tão fino que dava para sentir as molas espetando as costas. Gabriel olhou em volta, abraçando forte o dinossaurinho de pelúcia que ele carrega para todo lado. Tá frio, mamãe, ele sussurrou. Eu sorri para ele, tentando fingir coragem. A gente vai dar um jeito, meu amor. Mas por dentro, senti o estômago embrulhar. Eu sabia que o frio das paredes não seria o pior. O pior era o clima daquela casa. Naquela primeira noite, já deu para sentir o peso do julgamento. Depois do jantar, um prato de comida cinza e mole que minha mãe chamou de sobras. Gabriel só conseguiu comer 2 colheradas. Mais tarde, ele me puxou pelo braço. Mamãe, eu queria cereal. Eu esperei ela ir para a sala e fui na ponta dos pés até a cozinha. Abri a caixa de cereal e quase senti alívio, até que ouvi o barulho do metal batendo. Crash! A colher voou da mão dela, bateu na parede e caiu em pedaços no chão. Você acha que comida nasce em árvore agora que você está desempregada? Ela gritou. Ele já comeu. Gabriel se encolheu atrás de mim, os olhos marejados, mas não chorou, nem um pio. E foi ali que eu percebi. Aquela seria a primeira prova que meu filho enfrentaria naquela casa. Na manhã seguinte, o porão estava ainda mais gelado que na noite anterior. Gabriel acordou encolhido no cobertor fino, com as bochechas frias. O sol mal entrava pela janelinha empoeirada, mas mesmo assim, ele tentou sorrir quando me viu. Mamãe, tem café da manhã? Perguntou com aquela voz sonolenta. Subimos para esta cozinha e encontramos minha mãe, Dona Silvia, já sentada à mesa, mexendo no celular como se fôssemos invisíveis. Na mesa, havia só uma travessa de arroz empapado e um resto de frango meio cinza, provavelmente do jantar de 2 dias atrás. O cheiro de gordura fria enchia o ar. Senta e come, ela disse, sem nem levantar os olhos. Gabriel sentou, Olhou para o prato, depois para mim. Tentou uma garfada, mas fez uma careta discreta. Mamãe, eu posso comer cereal? Sussurrou, quase inaudível, como se tivesse medo que a avó ouvisse. Eu sabia que era arriscado, mas não aguentei ver meu filho com fome. Levantei, peguei a caixa de cereal que tínhamos comprado com as últimas moedas e comecei a preparar uma tigela com leite. Foi quando ouvi o estalo seco da colher batendo na parede. Pá! A colher de inox que eu segurava voou da minha mão, ricocheteou no azulejo e caiu no chão, entortada. Minha mãe ele estava de pé, os olhos faiscando. Você acha que isso aqui é hotel? Vai estragar a comida que eu preparei para abrir cereal caro? Ela gritou. Mãe, ele só queria um pouco? Tentei argumentar. Ela deu um passo à frente, apontando o dedo para mim e depois para o Gabriel. Esse menino precisa aprender a comer o que tem. Aqui ninguém vai se dar ao luxo de fazer vontade de criança. Gabriel se encolheu na cadeira, abraçando o dinossauro de pelúcia que tinha trazido do porão. Eu senti meu coração apertar. Ele não chorou, não reclamou, só baixou a cabeça e ficou em silêncio, como se estivesse tentando desaparecer. Naquele momento, percebi que aquele café da manhã era a primeira grande lição de resistência para meu filho, a primeira de muitas que viriam sob o teto gelado daquela casa. Eu respirei fundo, juntei os cacos da colher e voltei a sentar. Servi o arroz cinza no prato dele e tentei sorrir. Come só um pouquinho, meu amor. Depois a gente dá um jeito, murmurei. E ele, corajoso e silencioso, começou a mastigar devagar, enquanto eu sentia uma mistura de raiva e impotência crescer por dentro. Na manhã seguinte, acordei antes do sol nascer. O frio do porão parecia ter entrado nos ossos durante a noite.
The walls of that house held every echo of my childhood. Every silent dinner. Every sharp comment dressed up as just being honest. And as I watched Ethan's smile start to fade, I realized I had just brought my son into the same cold I had spent a lifetime trying to escape. By noon, the sun spilled through the living room blinds, but the house still felt dim. Ethan sat cross-legged on the carpet, quietly flipping through the one children's book I had packed. The silence was heavy. No laughter, no warmth, just the soft ticking of the grandfather clock that haunted my childhood. From the kitchen, my mom's voice rang out, "Lunch is ready!" For a split second, I felt relief. Maybe they were trying, in their own awkward way. I guided Ethan to the dining room, where the oak table gleamed under a plastic runner I remembered hating as a kid. 2 plates, forks perfectly aligned, and nothing else. I glanced around, thinking maybe Ethan's plate was still in the kitchen. Where should Ethan sit? I asked carefully. My dad didn't look up from unfolding his napkin. My mom, without a hint of embarrassment, replied, "We didn't prepare kid food. We assumed you'd handle that." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It was like I was 10 years old again, standing in that very room, heart pounding, because I'd dared to ask for seconds. Ethan climbed into a chair beside me, his little legs swinging. His eyes darted from the steaming bowls of soup in front of his grandparents to the empty spot in front of him. "Mom, where's mine?" he whispered. My throat burned as I fumbled in my tote bag. The only things I had were a slightly squished sandwich and a red apple I had packed, just in case. I split the sandwich in half and placed it on a napkin for him, along with a few apple slices. My mother raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's his lunch?" I clenched my jaw, forcing a neutral tone. "He'll be fine." But inside, I was a storm of shame and anger. I watched Ethan nibble quietly while his grandparents sipped their soup, never offering him a taste. The clink of their spoons against ceramic was the only sound in the room. I tried to break the tension. "So, Ethan just started first grade. He's really into puzzles and kids these days don't need constant praise," my dad interrupted. they get soft if you baby them. I swallowed hard. My chest ached with the weight of a familiar helplessness, the same one I felt every time I had sat at this table as a child, wishing I could disappear. Across from me, Ethan's shoulders slumped a little. He didn't say a word, but the light in his eyes had dimmed. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just an uncomfortable visit. I had willingly walked my son into the same toxic script I had spent my entire adult life trying to escape. The house was quieter than ever after lunch, and I could feel the heaviness pressing against my chest. Ethan had gone off to explore the living room while I excused myself to take a quick shower upstairs. 5 minutes, I told myself. I'll freshen up, and then we can head out. We've done our duty. The hot water rushed over me, but it didn't wash away the unease. Every creak of the old pipes reminded me where I was. Back in the house, where my voice never mattered. When I came downstairs toweling my hair, the living room was empty. "Ethan?" I called softly. No answer. I peeked into the kitchen. Empty. The backyard? No sign of him. My heart started pounding. The rooms were too quiet. "Ethan?" I called again, louder now, my voice cracking. I checked the den, the hallway, under the dining table, anywhere a small, anxious boy might hide. Nothing. A deep, cold dread seeped into my stomach. I turned toward the basement door. It was slightly ajar. The old wooden steps groaned under my weight as I descended, each one echoing in the stillness. At the bottom, the basement was dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor. And then I saw him. Ethan stood in the far corner, facing the wall, his little hands clenched at his sides. His shoulders shook with tiny, muffled sobs. "Ethan!" I rushed to him, my voice trembling. "Baby, what happened? Are you hurt?" He turned his tear-streaked face toward me, lower lip quivering. I just touched the picture frame, Mommy. I didn't mean to." My breath caught. "What? Who?" "Grandpa said I had to stand here, until I learned to respect other people's things." His voice broke. "I've been here, I think, forever." I glanced at my watch. Nearly 2 hours since lunch. I dropped to my knees, pulling him into my arms. His body was trembling, damp with sweat. His little sneakers dusted with the basement floor. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. All the years of swallowing my pain, all the excuses I had made for their cruelty. They had reached my son. My chest heaved with a mix of grief and fury. I held Ethan tighter, whispering. I carried Ethan upstairs, his arms clinging around my neck, his little face buried in my shoulder. His body was still trembling, his sobs quiet but sharp, each one cutting into me like glass. When we stepped into the living room, I froze. There they were, my parents, sitting on the couch, calmly eating lemon bars, like nothing had happened. I tightened my hold on Ethan. My voice shook, but I forced it out. Why was he in the basement?" My father barely glanced up. "He needed to learn respect." "Respect?" I snapped. "He's 6 years old. You made him stand in a dark basement for hours because he touched a picture frame?" My mother shrugged, licking sugar from her fingers. "He's a guest. Guests don't touch other people's things. He should be grateful we even let him in the house." I felt my chest tighten with a mix of disbelief and rage. Grateful? Grateful to be treated like trash in the same house I grew up in? "He's your grandson," I said, my voice rising. "Not a stray animal you can punish at your whim." My father suddenly slammed his hand on the armrest, his voice booming. "Respect is earned, not given. You were the same. Always soft, always defiant. And look how you turned out." His words hit me like ice water. But then, something in me shifted. All the fear, all the shame I had carried since childhood. It snapped. I straightened my back, my voice cold but steady. You're right. I did turn out different. And do you know why? Because I survived this house. And I swore my child never would. Their faces froze, the room suddenly heavy with a silence I hadn't felt since I was a kid. In that moment, I knew I was done. The obedient daughter they once controlled was gone. I would never let them touch my son, or my life, again. I didn't say another word. No screaming, no final argument, just silence. I scooped Ethan into my arms, his small hands still clutching the back of my shirt like a lifeline. He didn't protest, didn't even ask where we were going. He just buried his face in my shoulder as I grabbed my bag and walked straight out the door. Behind me, I could feel their eyes watching. Confused, maybe irritated. But I didn't give them the satisfaction of a single glance back. The cold air hit my face as I strapped Ethan into the back seat. He was exhausted, his eyelids heavy. I started the car, and we drove off into the quiet, empty road that cut through the woods. For the first 20 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the engine. Then, softly, I heard him murmur in his sleep, "I'm sorry I was bad, Mommy." My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. That little boy, my sweet, gentle 6-year-old, had spent an entire day being made to feel like he didn't belong, like he was a mistake. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, the silence solidified into something heavier, sharper, a decision. I would never allow my parents to touch him again. No more chances. No more excuses for, "That's just how they are." And as the miles rolled by under the tires, a plan began to form. A quiet revenge, not with yelling or chaos, but with a cold absence that would make them finally feel the emptiness they had sown in me. And now, in my son. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the house felt like a sanctuary. Safe. Ours. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I had to do. After that day, I went completely silent. No calls, no texts, no emails. I blocked their number on my phone, but I left the voicemail open. If they wanted to talk, they could talk to the void. And oh, they did. The first voicemail came 2 days later. My mother's voice sharp, clipped. "You're overreacting. This is what happens when you coddle a child. He'll grow up soft, just like you." The second was my father. "You're raising that boy to be disrespectful. Don't expect us to babysit some spoiled kid." By the end of the week, the tone had shifted. My mother's voice cracked as she whispered, "Please, don't shut us out. He's our grandson." But I didn't respond, not once. I learned something powerful in that silence. It wasn't just absence, it was a mirror. And I knew exactly how to make them face their own reflection. My father had an old debt with the local garage. Everyone in town knew he never paid for the new transmission he promised to settle. I drove down one afternoon, signed the check, and told the owner loudly enough for a few customers to hear. Just wanted to clear my father's balance. He's been struggling, I guess. It didn't take long for that little nugget to travel through our small town. Next was my mother. She loved her weekly coffee meetups with her friends, a ritual she bragged about constantly. One Saturday, I walked into the cafe with Ethan, calm and collected. I ordered a latte, slipped a folded stack of overdue bills, their bills, onto the table in front of her, and said with a polite smile, "Thought you might need these." They were piling up at my place. Her friends went silent. No one looked her in the eye. I left without another word. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to fight. I let silence and their own shame do the work. And slowly, I could feel the balance of power shifting. They were no longer the judges. They were the spectacle. Over the next few weeks, the shift was quiet, but undeniable. The same house that once felt like their kingdom now felt like a glass cage. Neighbors stopped lingering on the porch to chat. When my father waved from the driveway, the smiles were polite, tight, and short-lived. Even their favorite brunch spot, where my mother and her friends would gather every Sunday, canceled on them. "Oh, something came up," one of her friends said over the phone, voice distant. It was the third week in a row. I didn't need to confront them in person. I let their own words follow them home. A plain, white envelope appeared in their mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly typed. He should be grateful we let him in the house. Their own words, the ones they threw at my son like stones. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. "Respect is earned. He's just a guest." I could picture my mother's hands trembling as she read them. I could almost hear my father muttering about people spying and nosy neighbors. By the end of the month, I knew the mirror was working. My mother barely stepped outside anymore. She kept the curtains drawn, her silhouette flitting from room to room like a ghost afraid of the daylight. My father grew more irritable, slamming doors, muttering curses. But what could he do? He couldn't yell his way out of the truth. They were finally living in the world they built for me and my son. A world of fear, shame, and isolation. It was a gray Saturday afternoon when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a split second, my stomach turned cold. Through the small glass panel in the door, I saw my parents, the same people I hadn't seen in months, standing there, shrunken somehow, like the world had finally caught up with them. My father's hands were buried in his jacket pockets, shoulders tight. My mother clutched her purse against her chest, like a life raft. When I opened the door just enough to see their faces, she whispered, voice trembling, We just want to see him. Please." Behind me, tiny footsteps padded across the living room. Ethan peeked from behind my leg, wide-eyed. He hesitated for a moment, then took one careful step forward, looking up at the two people who had made him stand in the basement like a criminal. And in the softest, most heartbreaking voice, he asked, "Are you going to make me stand in the corner again?" The world went silent. My father's mouth opened, but no words came out. My mother blinked fast, tears welling, her lips quivering. They weren't prepared for this. They had come for me to forgive them, to smooth over what happened like it was just a family misunderstanding. But forgiveness wasn't mine to give. It was Ethan's, and he had already made his choice. He looked at me, then at them, and quietly closed the door. The soft click of the latch felt louder than any scream I could have made. Through the glass panel, I watched their faces. My mother's hands trembled. My father stared at the ground, frozen in the weight of a shame he couldn't escape. That day, my 6-year-old son gave them the final answer I'd spent a lifetime too scared to give. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently through the kitchen window, casting warm, golden stripes across the counter. Ethan and I stood side by side, mixing pancake batter and laughing softly over silly little mistakes. For the first time in a long while, the kitchen felt like our sanctuary, filled with warmth and the simple joy of being together. He flipped a lopsided pancake and grinned, flour dusting his cheeks like a badge of honor. "Mom, this is the best breakfast ever." I smiled back, the weight on my chest easing just a bit. Later that day, I sent a photo to my parents, an anonymous message without words. It was Ethan, standing in front of our modest living room. He was smiling wide, holding up a crayon drawing he'd made at school. In bright letters, the drawing read, "Home is where I feel safe." Weeks passed, and the ripple effects continued. Word spread through town about the debts quietly paid off, the overdue bills surfaced, and the subtle social exile. I heard from a neighbor that my mother had stopped attending her weekly brunches altogether, too ashamed to face the old crowd. My father, once a pillar of his community, no longer sat comfortably in his favorite chair. Instead, they appeared quietly at a local food pantry, volunteering, awkward, out of place, humbled. Gone was the arrogance, the control, the sense of entitlement. They had lost more than pride. They had lost the illusion of power.